Hi there, I'm Wendy and welcome to my channel. This video is following on from my how to crochet a granny square tutorial video, and in this video I'll be showing you a couple of different ways of joining your granny squares together. We'll be using UK stitches, and I've got a 4mm hook and I'm using UK weight double knitting yarn, and the yarn that I'm using today is Stylecraft Special DK. I'm not sponsored by them, but that's just the yarn that I like to use. Just before we start, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell so that you get updates when my future videos come out, and it would be great if you gave me a thumbs up too. You'll also find me on Instagram and Pinterest, but for now we'll get going and we'll take a look at how to join your granny squares together. This is the left-handed video, so if you're right-handed, I'll put a link in above here now and in the description box below to take you to the right-handed video. So for the first version of the UK double crochet stitch join that I'm going to show you today, I'm going to be working directly into the edges of a granny square. Now I've got a pile here ready to go, and I've decided to put a border around the edge of just doing an extra round at the very end in white. That's totally down to you, that's just my personal taste. And then with my granny squares, I always go round in the same direction. I don't turn my granny squares every row when I'm making them. So my granny squares will always have a right side and a wrong side. Now, if you look at the wrong side, you can see that it's flatter. And if I turn it over back to the right side, you can see it's more prominent. It's got more texture in it. And you can also see the line of chain and stitches around the edge. So I'm going to put this one aside and we're going to work with this 9 I have here. So I like to lay them out first, how I'm going to put them together. So I'll just do that, and I'm doing mine like a checkerboard. So it's the same colours, but I've just alternated which colour I've started with. Okay, so I hope I've got that all on the screen for you. Okay, and then I'm going to say that this is the width and this is the length. So what I do is I just pile them all up on top of each other in little lines. Okay, and then I'm going to be putting each of these together like a little scarf. So I'm going to be joining them here and here, and then again with this pile and with this pile, and then I'm going to gradually be then adding the little scarves together. And the reason that I think that this is a good method with beginners is that it gives you a chance to change your squares around if you're not quite happy or you feel you've made a mistake putting one square next to another. So I'm going to take these aside, and we're going to focus on these 3 squares here. So for this granny square join, I'm going to put the right sides of my granny square together like that, and I'm going to be crocheting along the edge, and I'm going to have the ridge, the seam of the stitch that I'm making is going to be appearing on the back. So my granny square will be nice and neat on the front. So I'm going to use a different colour yarn so that you can see what I'm doing, and I'll do that for one seam, and then I'll use white for the next seam so you can see how it won't notice. So the first thing I'll do now is make a slip knot, and I'm going to get my crochet hook, pop my slip knot on the crochet hook, and then pick up my squares with the right sides together, so the wrong sides are on the outside, and I'm going to make sure that my yarn is hanging down at the back, my slip knot is on the hook, and I'm going to put the hook through one granny square in the corner and then directly through to the other granny square. So both granny squares are now on my crochet hook. Then I'm going to take the yarn over and pull through both, and then continue that right back so that I've made a slip stitch and I've secured it. Now I'm going to make one chain, okay, and that's because we're going to be working a row of double crochet. So now I'm going to be working into both of the granny squares, and I'm going to be working into the top of each treble and into the chain space. So the way that it works is I take my hook, I've got my yarn to the back of my work, and I take my hook through the first stitch. Okay, so there's my first V. And then I take it through the corresponding stitch on the back square. So I've got 2 sets of V's on my hook. I then take the yarn over the hook and I pull it through to the front, and I've got 2 stitches on my hook, and then yarn over the hook and pull through to 1. So I'm going to do that in the next stitch. I'm going to take my hook through both sides of the V on the front square, and then through both sides of the V on the back square, yarn over the hook, pull the hook through to the front, and I've got 2 stitches on my hook, yarn over the hook and pull through to 1. And then I'm going to go into the third treble. So I'm going through both sides of the stitch on the front square, both sides of the stitch on the back square, yarn over the hook, hook back through to the front, and I've got 2 stitches on my hook, yarn over the hook and pull through to 1. So now I've got the gap, I've got the chain space, and I quite simply put my hook through the chain space of both squares again, and then it's yarn over the hook, pull back through to the front, yarn over the hook and pull back through to 1. So I'm going to go through another set for you. So I'm taking that hook through the front square on both sides of the stitch, and then on the back square both sides of the stitch, yarn over the hook, pull the hook back through to the front, yarn over the hook and pull back through to 1. Now I've got the second of my trebles that's in that cluster. So it's hook through the stitch on the first square at the front, hook through the stitch on the back square, yarn over the hook, hook through to the front, yarn over the hook and pull back through to 1. And then I've got the last of my 3 trebles in this cluster. The hook goes through both sides of the stitch on the front square, and then both sides of the stitch on the back square, yarn over the hook and pull back through to the front, yarn over the hook and pull back through to 1. So now I've got my gap, I've got my chain space. So I go through the gap, yarn over the hook, pull back through to the front, yarn over the hook and pull back through to 1. So now I'm going to continue right till I get to this very last gap in the corner. So I'll just do that and meet you at the end. So I'm back now, and I've made my last double crochet in the third treble of the last cluster of 3 trebles here, and I've got this gap here, the gap in the corner, and I'm going to make one last double crochet in that gap going through both of the squares, and then I can cut my yarn and yarn over the hook and flick it through, and that just secures the end for you, and that has finished off. Now this is the back of our squares where we've got this ridge that we're looking at that we can see in yellow, and then if I turn it over to the right side, you can see that the double crochet stitches have caused these little stripes that are going across, but this won't notice at all if you're doing your seam in exactly the same color as the last row of your granny square. So I'm going to take the third square that was in my first pile, and I'm going to put the right sides of the squares together, and I've popped a slip knot on my crochet hook, and I'm holding my yarn to the back of my work, crochet hook to the front, and then I'm going through the corner hole, the corner gap in both of the squares, yarn over the hook and create that slip stitch. and that will secure that first end of my seam, and then 1 chain as I'm working a row of double crochet, and then I'm going to make 1 double crochet in each of these 3 trebles, going through both sides of the front granny square and both sides of the back granny square. So here we go, this is going through the first treble through both squares, and then a double crochet again going through the front square and the back square, back to 2 and back to 1, and then through both squares of the third stitch, and then I'm going to make a double crochet in the gap, and again I'm going to continue this way and meet you at the end just before I'm about to finish off. So that's it, I've made my last double crochet in the last treble, so I'm just going to make 1 last double crochet in the gap in that chain space right in the corner, and then again cut my yarn, leaving enough that I can sew the ends in afterwards, yarn over the hook 1 more time and pull it through and flick it off. So now both ends are secure. So now when we look at the back, we can see that we've got the ridge in the yellow here and the ridge in the white. And these ridges, you can use them as a decorative feature. And as you'll see, I very often do this on my blankets. So when I turn it over now, when you have a look at it, you can see that where we have these little yellow stripes, where I made the double crochet in yellow, when I've used the same colour, it's not noticeable at all, and it makes quite a sturdy seam. So now I'm going to get my other strips of crochet that I made, lay them out, and do exactly the same thing. So for these 2 strips here, I'm going to be joining these seams, and then I'm going to come back to you and show you how we then connect the seams together. And so I'm back now, and I've made all my little double crochet seams across the edges of my granny squares and made these little scarf type strips. So it's time now to connect these together to make one overall main piece. So I'm just going to move one aside for now and turn these on their side and pop the right sides together. So I've got the wrong sides of the square on my outside. I've popped a slip knot on my hook, so that's ready, and I'm going to go through the corner gap through both sides of the square, and I've got my yarn to the back, so it's yarn over, pull through and all the way to 1 to make my slip stitch, and then make 1 chain. And so now I'm ready again. So I'm going to carry on now till I've got to this corner, and then I'll just show you how I jump across the corner. Okay, so I've made my last double crochet in the last treble of the row, and I have my gap here in the corner. So again, I'm going to make 1 double crochet through both of the granny squares in that corner gap, and then I'm going to jump across to the corner gaps in the next square. So the hook goes through the front granny square and the back granny square in that corner gap, and I can make my double crochet stitch, and then I'm ready to double crochet all the way till I get to the next corner gap. So I'll do that and I'll meet you to make the next one. So again, I've made my last double crochet in the last of the 3 trebles, and I've got this corner gap again here. So I'm going to put my finger through it so you can see. So I'm going to make a double crochet in that corner gap and then jump across the seam to the next square and make a double crochet in the corner gap of the next 2 granny squares. And so now I'm ready to continue all the way to the end, and I'll finalize by making my last double crochet in that last corner gap. So again, I'm going to meet you at the end. So again, I've made my last double crochet in the last of the 3 trebles in this final cluster, and I've got this last corner gap here, so I'm just going to make 1 more double crochet in that, and I'm ready now to just cut my yarn round the hook and flick it off, and that is our seam made. So you can see this is coming along quite nicely now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take out these yellow stitches here, this yellow row of double crochet, and then I'm going to lay this one on top as well with the right sides together, do exactly the same thing, and meet you back here so you can get the overall impression of seeing how 9 squares together look using this method. And so I'm now back, and I've finished double crocheting all the lengthways seams together as well now, and it's looking pretty neat. It's made a nice stable sturdy seam. You've got the ridges on the edge, and all that's left now is for me to darn in my ends, which I will just lose in these rows of double crochet stitches. All the ends are secure because we started with a slip knot and we secured the ends when we bound off afterwards. So I'm literally just going to get a wool type darning needle and run them through to about here. So that will be quick and easy to do. It does also make quite a nice decorative stitch to have on the front as well, so the choice is yours which way round you make your seam. So now I'm going to move on to use the other way of making the double crochet stitch to join your granny squares together, and this is the method that I tend to use the most myself. So I'll pop this out the way and bring in my other squares. So I'm back to the beginning again, and I'm looking at another granny square that I'm going to edge, and I'm going to make a round of double crochet around each of my squares this time as well. And again, I've got a piece that's got 9 squares in total. And as I've said before, this is the method that I tend to use when I'm connecting my granny squares and motifs. It's just the way that I like to do it. But as I say, it's all down to personal choice. Now I'm just going to join my yarn in any corner space and make 1 chain. That's because I'm going to work a round of UK double crochet. And then in the corner space, I'm going to make 1 double crochet, 1 chain, and 1 double crochet. And then in each of the 3 trebles, I'm going to work 1 double crochet. That's my second, and that's my third. Okay, and then in the chain space, it's just 1 double crochet. So I'll do that once more. 1 double crochet, 2 double crochets, 3 double crochets, and 1 in the gap or the chain space. So we're just going to continue till we get to the corner, just double crocheting all the way along. So I'm in my last set, and that's the last double crochet in the last treble, and now I'm at my corner. So I'm going to make 1 double crochet, 1 chain, and 1 double crochet, and that's just going to give us that little gap that we can have to work into this time when we're putting our squares together. So now I'm going to continue edging this square, just working around as before. 1 double crochet into the top of each treble stitch and 1 double crochet in the gap, and then in each corner it's 1 double crochet, 1 chain, 1 double crochet, and I'll see you at the end to just finish off, and then we can start putting our squares together. So now I've got to the end of my round, so I'm literally just going to join with a slip stitch and just fasten off. So we're now ready to join these squares together. Now this time, just so that you can see the difference, I'm going to use the ridge on the double crochet stitch on the front. And as I say, this is how I often pop mine together. So I'm going to be putting the squares together with the wrong sides on the inside and the right sides on the outside. Okay? So it's the wrong sides together on the inside and the right sides looking at us on the outside. And again, I'm going to put the first one together using a different coloured yarn so that you can see exactly what I'm doing and the effect that it's making. And then the second one I'll do in white so that you can compare the difference between them. So I'm popping a slip knot on my hook. And where I made that one chain in the corner, I'm going to pop my hook through that, and again the corresponding one chain on the back. Okay, and then yarn through and make my slip stitch, one chain, and we're ready to double crochet across. So just like before, I'm going through both sides of the V, both sides of the stitch on the front granny square and the back granny square, and I'm treating them both as one and making a double crochet. And again into the next one, front granny square, back granny square, yarn over and through. And of course with this method I don't have any gaps to work into. I'm just working across, going through every stitch. But what I do is when I get to a gap underneath, I just make sure that the granny squares are both in place, that one hasn't gone out of sync with the other. So I just make sure that they're lying in correspondence. So if you do have to miss the odd stitch, it's not the end of the world and it won't be noticed. What's more important is that your corners match up with this method. So I'm now just going to double crochet across till I get to the end, and I'm going to meet you back here then. So I'm back to the end of my row, and I'm just going to find that little corner chain space that we made. If you remember, in the corner we made 1 double crochet, 1 chain, 1 double crochet. So I'm going to pop the hook through that 1 chain space in the corner there, and I'm going to pop it through the chain space in the corresponding square at the back and make my final double crochet stitch. And then I can cut my yarn, take the yarn over the hook one more time and flick it off to secure it. And that is our seam made. And I think it looks nice on the front of a granny square. So I'm going to do the next one in white, so again you can see how it looks. So again, this time I'm putting the wrong sides of the square together. So I've got the wrong sides of the square on the inside, and the right sides of the square are facing outwards looking at me, and I've got a slip knot on my hook, and I'm going to pop the hook through that little tiny chain space in the corner of the front square and in the corresponding chain space on the back square. Yarn over the hook and make that slip stitch. Then it's 1 chain, and I'm going to double crochet through the front square and the back square. And I'm just going to do this on every stitch all the way along, just like I did before. And I'm going to make my last double crochet in that little chain space again. Then it's cut the yarn over the hook and flick it off. And that's our second seam complete. So now you can see what it's looking like on the front of the squares. So you've got the yellow seam, which when we look at the back, again, you'll see those little stripes coming through. So you can use that as a decorative effect if you want. And on the white, it doesn't notice at all. So now I'm going to do this with my 2 other sets of 3 granny squares so that we can then put the 3 strips together to create another overall piece. So I've now got my 3 little scarf type strips just like before, made ready to go, and we can start joining them up. So I'm just going to pop one aside, turn these on their side, again wrong sides together and right sides outwards for this one, and we're going to put the slip knot on our hook and go into that corner chain space and through the chain space on the corresponding square at the back, make that slip stitch, 1 chain, and now we're ready to double crochet across each stitch until we reach the corner. So I'm just making my last double crochet stitch here. And then I'm going to work into that little 1 chain space through both sides of the granny square, and then jump across the seam and work into the chain space in the corner of the next granny square. Okay, and then we're ready to double crochet along to the next seam. So I'm going to carry on now, and then I'm just going to guide you across that next seam again. So I've got to the next seam. I'm just going to look for that little 1 chain space in the corner, pop my hook through there, and then go through the corresponding chain space in the granny square behind, yarn over the hook and pull through to the front, yarn over the hook, and that's another double crochet. So again, I'm just going to look for that little corner chain space on the next square and go through the same chain space on the back square, pull through to the front and make my double crochet stitch, and now I can just continue to the end. So again, I'm going to meet you back here when I get to the end of the seam. So I'm back at the end, and I'm just going to make sure that I make my last double crochet in the corner space on the front square and on the back square, and then I can make my last double crochet stitch and then cut my yarn and then take the yarn over the hook and pull it through so that I flick it off and I'm securing it, and that is our seam complete. Okay, so I think that looks pretty nice. So all I need to do now is put my next set together. So I'm going to make sure that I've got the right sides facing and the wrong sides together, and I'll work this last seam and then I'll come back to you and we can take a look at both sets of squares using the different techniques. So I'm back now, and I've finished my seams where I've double crocheted my strips together, and this 9 square piece is complete. You can see this is the back view where you've got the smoother side, but I actually like the ridge as a decorative edge, but that's down to personal choice. So we can compare this to the first style that we did. I've now sewn the ends in, but I haven't blocked either of these. They literally are just as we've made them today. So on the first one, I had the double crochet on the back of the work, and we'd worked a round of trebles around the edge, and then on this last one we just worked a round of double crochet stitches around the edge and had the seams of the double crochet as a decorative edge. So it would be great if you left a comment as to which you prefer. Neither is right or wrong, it's all down to your personal preference. So I really hope that you've enjoyed this and it's useful and it's given you some ideas and thoughts for putting your own granny squares together. So for now, thanks for joining me, thanks for watching, happy crocheting and see you soon.